Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability, a podcast dedicated to putting the human back into humanity. Tonight, I'm already laughing with my friend and peer, Olga Piehler, who has joined me this evening. She is Director and Program Manager and Business Development Manager at a wonderful organization called Making Everlasting Memories. And she's also founder of My Why. Welcome to the podcast, Olga. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Well,
How
we're
are
already
you?
laughing. We're already laughing. So we're gonna have a good conversation. No, I am very well. Thank you very much. But what I'd like to do as we get going is, for those that may not know you, just give us a little bit of a lowdown on who you are. You know, what do you do for work day to day, and what was your inspiration for My Why? How did that come into being?
So I'm Olga Piehler, and part of what we were laughing is I was trying to explain to Gary how to pronounce my last name, and I said, "Yeah, just like a potato peeler," and actually that got him completely lost in the thought. So my name is Olga. I am actually I was born and raised in Spain, and I came to the United States as a foreign exchange student. And I've been here ever since. It's like I never left. They couldn't get rid of me. And I have spent most of my career working for a wonderful organization, as Gary mentioned, called Making Everlasting Memories. We are in the software as a service space, and our mission is to help celebrate lives lived. So we are in the funeral space, help tell stories and archive those memories and help families through their most difficult time in their lives. Mm-hmm. So with them, I have helped develop new programs to be brought to funeral homes across North America, Canada, and the US. And I've spent my career doing that, and that's gotten me now to a point where here I am and have been every day helping others celebrate a life lived. Mm-hmm. And that really got me thinking to where in that purpose does it require that one has to be passed. So as I thought more about that, I came up with, well, why am I here? What is it that I contribute to the world? How do I want to make the world a better place? And what would it be said in my obituary when I actually pass? And that led me to start thinking about my why. It's spelled MYWY. And I created this site called mywhy.io. And really, it started with a personal purpose and a personal question, but then I extended that to the world of an organization. And really, what is the purpose of an organization? What is the gap that it exists between the practice values and the aspirational values within an organization? How are those lived every day to create a culture that then can actually consistently deliver in an experience that will lead to customer loyalty?
My goodness. Like, I've got 30 questions, Olga, already. Do you know, the thing that's coming up from this, two things straight away, which are so powerful for me as you speak. One is you're in the business of creating lasting memories for those that have passed. And I always think about Gary Reed, CEO of WD-40, who his little lubricants can is around creating lasting memories. You know, so whether you've passed, whether you're still here, there's something for me about how do we get into living the moment more and celebrating while we are here, as well as the great work you're doing at your organization, celebrating once we're gone. So there's something about why wait until the end in what you're speaking about. Why aren't we making the most of what we've got as well?
Yes. I was talking with my boss just last week, and we were talking about what's the purpose of our company and what are we doing. And his response to me was so simple. He said, Olga, we are called Making Everlasting Memories. That's our purpose. You can then peel that onion back about, that means every time we talk with a customer and the impact that we have in their life, the employees that are in our teams and how they feel about when they're at work and the experiences that we share with one another and with each other. it applies to everything that we do and how we want to do it. We want to make memorable moments with everyone that we touch, and that just speaks to me and who I am. And you and I have shared the conversation about, I deeply believe that we are all walking miracles, and it is our responsibility to share the gift that we have been given with the world. And every interaction that we have with another human being is an opportunity for us to share that gift.
I want to just come back to that comment a moment. Where did that come from for you? I believe we are all walking miracles. There'll be some people maybe listening now going, cool, that's profound, or, well, that's really, nice and cheesy. But I know you, and I know that matters to your core. You believe that in your heart. Where did that come from for you?
So my background actually is in neuroscience. And so I do have a master's in psychophysics. We used, it's psychophysics because we actually use human observers. I was in the area of motion detection in the visual system. And we had to actually use, we cannot put an electrode on a human being to measure the cellular, the neural activity on the brain. So instead we had to use math and mathematical models to model the behavior. So we would put in a stimulus, and then through the response, we would create a model. And so I studied a lot about how the brain works. And at the time, it's a miracle. It's a miracle that you and I are here today having that conversation, this conversation. And so I guess that's where I started to think about us as walking miracles. And I told you in the past about how it's a trillion cells. We have, a trillion cells that make up who we are. And everything is just a electrochemical message navigating from one cell to the next. And all that had to happen for however many years and however many times for you to be sitting right across from me right now, having this conversation. And any one of those messages going in a different way, in a different path, it would have made today different. And to me, that's just a miracle. And it's a gift that we have been given. And that's where my thought process comes from that.
That's beautiful. It's funny. It makes me think of our mutual friend Cornell Thomas, and I remember what he said to me when he and I spoke recently, which was, we as human beings have beaten 1 in 400 billion odds of being here. Mm-hmm. And I want people, if people are listening to us, or it's the first time, or they've listened to the podcast before, I just really want to hold the space for a second there. If you're busy running around, reacting to a boss that's maybe a bully, or you're getting frustrated at work, just give yourself permission just for this second to think you are a walking miracle. Like, I don't think we give ourselves that much space to sort of digest and internalize that, do we?
The perfection that has to be going on inside your body today for you to just sit where you are, it's amazing, because anything else can cause a havoc and make things go wrong. And we all know cancer, we all know all these things. So it's a perfect melody that has to play second after second after second for us to be able to sit here and just talk.
It's beautiful. So I want to keep exploring this. So where did the interest from your side, going back to your education, back to doing the masters in psychology, etc., was that always something within, was there always that curiousness within you around people and the body and stuff, or did that evolve? Where did that come from for you?
When I was a kid, I've never shared this with anybody. So here we go. I know. Oh my gosh. When I was a kid, when you think about what you want to be when you grow up, my out loud answer was I wanted to be an astronaut. But my internal answer was I wanted to be an encyclopedia. And this is, okay, so bear with me. But I would have at home back in the, I'm not the youngest of the bunch. So we actually had the encyclopedia albums that looked beautiful in the living room for everybody to see. And I would actually grab a volume And I would just look through all the names, and I would see who these people were and the contributions that they made and how they changed the world. And I would fantasize about one day my name is going to be here. And at that time, encyclopedias, there were a lot of volumes, but it was a limited amount of space. So you had to do a nice contribution to be able to be there. Like nowadays with the web and Wikipedia, there's enough, the space is not the same as it was in the past. And for me, at the time, I thought, oh, it's just because I want to be famous. And then I thought, as I've grown and mature, I thought, no, you have to have a meaningful contribution in order to belong there. And a lot of those, of course, were scientifically based and historical. So I've always been fascinated by that, and I'm pretty analytical. And I think naturally, I just gravitated towards human behavior and biology and things like that.
Well, thank you for sharing. I'm always so grateful when someone shares a little bit of them. But that's that vulnerability, a little bit of them they don't always share. That's wonderful. And I actually love what you're speaking to as well, which is often we talk about that on this podcast, is that curiosity part.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever was going on in your young mind at that time, you had this deep curiosity to just envision that you could be in there one day.
Yeah.
How have you maintained that, or how have you managed to hold on to that? Because you're clearly still very curious now, very passionate around that. So how have you managed to keep hold of it in the main as you become an adult? Because so often people lose that as they go to the world of work or they go into adult life.
Yeah, and I believe I've lost it at times in my life. And one of the ways is I read a lot. Mm-hmm. And now I'm hooked up to podcasts, thanks to you, actually, mister. And so I do read a lot, and then I get through these rabbit holes of one thing leads me to the next, and I ask a lot of questions, and I think that's part of how I feed that curiosity. I like to experiment. I like to try things, and I've been given the opportunity through work. And when you are in business and program development, for example, a lot of it is you're trying to implement a solution. So it's a lot through experimentation. What worked, what didn't work, how do we build on? So in some ways in my work life, I've been able to get into a problem solving type of positions, that whether it was even customer service at the beginning, is somebody calling with a problem and you gotta figure out what the solution is. And I think that helps keep you open-minded and curious as to how to answer the question you have in front of you.
So tell us a little bit, for me and for our listeners right now, I'm really intrigued. Tell us a rabbit hole you've got lost down recently when you've read a book or something. What's really piqued your interest and you've completely lost yourself within that particular topic?
Let me think. So I I will, for example, listen to, so I was just attending a summit, an online summit, where Raj Sisodia was talking about the healing organization. So then that led me to buy the book. So then as I was reading that book, I started to, I started reading the healing organization. And then from there, it kind of got me a little bit thinking about employee engagement. So then I started at the same time reading Pat Lencioni's book about it's the fable with employee engagement. So then I went through that. And then at the same time in that summit, Miki Agrol was also presenting, and she was talking about disruption. And then I got curious about, so I started reading her book, Disrupt Her. And then with that, a lot of even the conversations you're having as of late about disrupting yourself and what that means. And so then it gets me to, okay, chapter 2 of her book is about stuff and how we think to believe that success is the amount of things you accumulate. So then that brings me to our friend Chris Lovett and his minimalism and how he's now having the challenge. So the October challenge. So now I'm doing the challenge with him, and it's just one of the, everything is interconnected anyhow. And so those are the rabbit holes I get myself into, but they're all kind of leading to the same place, which is a better version of me.
Wow. Speak about that. Why do you think all of these things are leading back there?
That's okay. So I think that those things help me discover either things that are important to me, things that I care about, things that I believe in, and they give me the courage to keep fighting for them, I guess, to keep not silencing that voice that lives inside of me that says, this is what you stand for, and this is what makes your heart smile, and these are the things that are important to you, and you can educate yourself so that you can help educate others. And they help me get away from the status quo. And if I'm falling along the status quo, then I'm not being the best version of me. I'm being the status quo average version of everybody.
Very powerful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think there's such a strong message there for all of us around, we don't all need to be game changers and changing the world, but I think we can all do it in our own way, can't we? It doesn't have to be seen by everybody, but there can be that little bit of, I've got a personal belief, Olga, that we're all here to grow and to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, whatever that means. It might be you looking after your family. It might be bringing out the next product that gets us to Mars. It doesn't matter the scale of it, but I genuinely believe we're all here to make a contribution bigger than the time we've got on the planet. And I just wonder if the way organizations are structured, to come onto the corporate organizational setting a little bit, and maybe some of your work and your thinking, what is it that we need to do to try and help more people experiment more, to live their purpose more at work, to be able to do what you're doing and stay in that curiosity and feed this? Because basically what I'm hearing you say, you're feeding your soul and not just your mind and your brain. And so what do we need to do more of, or what do we need more of in the workplace to allow more people to step into that space, do you think?
The first thing that I encounter as a barrier is that there's a lack of acceptance that is okay. And so I guess the first thing I would do is we need to provide organizations and the people running the organizations with the realization and the acceptance that this is necessary, that you can't hide in the excuse of, well, we are a large organization, this is how business is being done. I feel like that's where a lot of the pain starts to get originated from. There is these blind, we're looking at the world with these lenses that are not, they don't work, but we're not giving ourselves the permission to take the lenses off, to look through a different lens. And instead we just kind of keep at it.
That's really. What in your experience or in your belief, what keeps people or leaders with those lenses fixed to their face and with that sort of narrower view of what is possible? What's going on here? Yeah.
Fear. But to me, what I think about fear and what gets tricky about fear is the worst fear is the one you're not even aware of. It's like tricky. It hides. So you can't fight it, because it doesn't show up as that. It shows up as different things, like maybe it's procrastination, maybe it's a different, but you don't understand this fear. And particularly, I believe, as a male, which right now, when you look at companies and CEOs, majority would be males, you're not allowed to have fear. So how are we gonna fight something that we can barely see and we're not allowed to have?
Interesting mix.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But I think that leads us nicely to the title of this podcast. So obviously around vulnerability. So what does vulnerability mean to you as Olga? If you're going to describe it to one of these leaders, they're leading an organization, they can't see that fear going on for them, but maybe as one of the tools, or maybe something they could use to try and step into understanding that fear, might be to show a bit more of themselves. You know, if you were looking to try and explain what vulnerability meant, how would you describe it as Olga?
I would describe it as a level of self-awareness that gives you the confidence to share that internal you with the rest of the world. But you need to be self-aware enough that you're confident to share it. So I think that part of being vulnerable, a big part of being able to be vulnerable, is you need to be confident within yourself.
That's really interesting. What I'm sensing you'll speak to a little bit, and we both know a wonderful human being called Tracy Fenton from World Blue. And I remember her doing some work with me on self-worth. I'm getting the feeling you're sort of speaking a little bit towards, do we believe, like, if we're not good enough, we're going to be able to show some of that to the rest of the world? Like,
yes. So it's just having that confidence that you know who you are without judgment. And then through that process, you're able to freely share with others where you are, who you are. But it's this, so it's really showing up as yourself. But you have to know who you are first, otherwise you can't show up as yourself.
do you think it's easier to be vulnerable in community? Or do you think people, in your opinion, maybe need to find their own way first? I don't know the answer. It's like, it's a wonderful.
Research would tell you that in community we tend to be less self-accountable sometimes, so that the whole share responsibility. So if you're going to be in trouble, you don't want to be in trouble in front of a bunch of strangers or in front of a bunch of people, because then you're less likely to get help. So community in some ways makes us less self-accountable. And I do believe to have vulnerability, you do need to be accountable. But maybe it talks about the type of community and the type of connection, because at the same time, when you are in community, in true community and in true connection with others, you are also then a bigger version of yourself.
Well, I don't think we have a better segue than how you and I first met with the Humans First conversation. Which I think you're speaking to beautifully, which is that community of people that get together every week and for whatever reason are able to show that an awful lot of their full self without knowing anybody else. Like I find it quite incredible what Mike Vacanti, with the support of Kevin, has brought to life. How do we get 30 people on a call, Olga, all bringing their fullest, genuinely fullest self, like every week in, week out? It's like it's unreal, isn't it?
So maybe it goes to the core of what's community. So if community is just a bunch of people, maybe no. But if it's the true sense of community, which is where connectedness lives and resides, and you're truly, it's like your heartbeat is an extension of somebody else's heartbeat, and then their truth and makes you see your truth. You know, you know how I like to say, be seen and see others. I feel like our first responsibility is for us to show ourselves, so that others have the ability to show themselves, and then it's your responsibility to see them as themselves. And
Beautiful. Got me thinking now, Olga. Got me.
I know, audience, we apologize for the silence, but we are actually thinking.
Do you want to know something though? We don't, with all due respect, you kind listener, we don't apologize. Sometimes this happens where actually, you know, you get to a certain natural pause. And one of the things I learned is actually beautiful. I was on an event with a friend, Colin Smith, the listener, as he's affectionately known. He invited me along to an organizational development event a couple of weeks ago. And we actually did an event on dialogue. And I wrote a blog about this, which I'll attach to the show notes. And honestly, I've never experienced anything like it, where literally the lady leading it, I believe her name was Caroline, and she does work with Extinction Rebellion, you know, so the climate change protesters and whatnot. But she was taking us through dialogue and showing the power of silence. We had a circle of around 25 people sat there. And at first, she said, I can only speak if you feel the need to speak. And me being the first, I was like, oh, I sort of feel the need to speak. I like it. But there's about a minute. I then said something. It wasn't particularly insightful, but it's just what I felt in the moment. But then as I went through this experience for an hour, there was up to a 6-minute silence in this group of 25 people. Then someone would just go bang. And it was unbelievable. It was the most, I literally stood up at the end of this hour, and I wrote it in my blog. I felt like I had steel rods going from the sky through the whole of my body out the bottom of my feet. I was just so grounded. It was a spirit, like, it's a closer thing to a spiritual experience. But I knew exactly where I was. I knew who I was with. And it was just that complete loss of self. Like it's like when you're asleep. You know, Piers Thurston said on an event recently, where does your mind go when you're asleep?
Where? Who knows?
But this is the point. Like, we're so used to being intellectual about everything. We're actually, and I find you fascinating because you've got this real strong scientific background, but clearly have a very deep spiritual energy at the same time. So I'm really interested. Have you always been aware of that? Are you comfortable with that? Is it something you've had to sort of allow to be? You know, how's that sort of mix come about for you?
It's maybe it's just the way my life developed. So right up until I was 26 years old, I was up to my elbows in research. I spent time in Australia at the Victorian College of Optometry, working on finishing up a PhD on texture segregation. And there I was using cats. And then here I come, and I go into a world where it's all about human lives and loss, and it's all about the heart. So for the past 18 years, I've been in a very human environment when it comes to business, to which I have applied a lot of the techniques and analytics and research and way about implementing or testing a hypothesis when you're trying to roll out a program. And so that very scientific background just kind of came into a very human business. And maybe that's where now is the combination of both.
That's beautiful. That's so cool. Love that. So what's next for My Why? So you've done some wonderful work with Making Everlasting Memories. You've got My Why as an what do people need to know about to try and get in contact with you for you to maybe help them see their why more fully in themselves?
So one of the things that I have started is a series of the first module, and it's the bigger module, is called the secret life of organizations. So part of that is my learnings through at MEM, Making Everlasting Memories. We started as a very small company. So it's sort of like going from a startup to 18 years later being part of a large corporation. And so what happens in that life span of an organization? So I apply a lot of the principles about maybe you start with a very clear purpose and a very tight team, but then as it grows, what happens, and do you lose your spark? And it's almost like if you could even compare it to a human being that is starting, and you start to learn, and then you kind of go through your terrible twos, and then you're doing all right, and then you're the rebel teenager, and you have the midlife crisis. And so kind of taking people through that journey. And it's a so you could sign up for one of those sessions. The other one then is breaking it down into the 3 components that I find are very important. So then this is my In a World Where You Can Be Anything series. So I have where in a world where you can be anything, be you. And that's all about finding purpose, whether it's for you personally or as an organization. Mm-hmm. Then that moves you to in a world where you can be anything, be kind. And that's about leadership and leadership development, and what are the qualities of leadership, and how do you get your leadership aligned to match your purpose. And then the last one then, that least it's in a world where you can be anything, be loved. And that's about customer loyalty, which at the end of the day lives and breathes in your culture. Because one of the things, as I've read and I've observed and I've experimented, that I've realized is that your customer experience will never exceed your employee experience. And to put it in mathematical terms, I would say customer experience greater, equal, that means cannot be greater or equal than your employee experience. And the reason why I say that is, from everything that I know, in order to create loyalty, you need a consistent experience. And if you have to show up day in and day out in a consistent manner, no matter what you do, your employees have to be engaged, and you have to have a winning culture, or however you want to describe it, but that will show in your culture.
That's really cool. I really love that. I've heard, so a good friend, Laura Plaxton, mm-hmm. speaks about employee experience and shareholder experience, etc. But I really like that. I love that, so customer experience can never be greater than the employee experience.
Mm-mm. You can transactionally. So once in a while, you can, of course you can. But to get to loyalty, not mm-hmm. satisfaction, but loyalty, that requires consistency, and you cannot get consistency, or your consistency will equal your employee experience. So
it's really nice because what you're speaking to so beautifully for me is that is a very much a human connection that drives loyalty. Of course, mm-hmm. you can have an element of tech and mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. bonuses and discount, which helps loyalty. But what I'm sensing is the longevity is going to come still from a human connection.
Yeah, loyalty is a feeling. Loyalty is a feeling, and it's the responsibility of the customer. The steps that lead to that feeling are the responsibility of the organization.
Cool. You're throwing some nuggets out today, Olga, I tell you. I'm going to have to listen back to this. That's really cool. Really cool.
But loyalty is a feeling. It's a feeling of love. It's an emotion. And it's the responsibility of the customer. Nobody else can provide that. The steps that lead to that feeling are the responsibility of the organization.
I think it seems obvious. It's not always obvious, but it seems obvious. If you think about it, again, part of what we discussed earlier on in this conversation is it's all on us. Our human experience as an individual is all what we mm-hmm. see ultimately inside mm-hmm. out. Mm-hmm. Olga can't say to Gary, I believe that you will now be more loyal because of X.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to feel that it's going to make me more loyal.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst we're part of this beautiful, interconnected, single human race, we've still got all of our unique parts to play in it, which is exciting.
And honestly, that's how I ended up in my why. I mean, because I've always been, because of my roles, very much into the customer and the customer experience and creating loyalty and enduring relationships. And as I delved more into what I needed to do that, then I started to peel the onion. And then I was like, okay, well, consistently I have to provide that experience. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, I need to make sure that my team does that every day. Well, how do they do that? Well, that's through their culture. Well, how do we create culture? Well, that's through alignment in leadership, because the leader, the frontline leader, is ultimately kind of directing or by the lack of direction, creating that culture. Well, how do the leaders get aligned? Well, then they need to have a purpose. And are they clear about the purpose? And is that purpose clearly defined and articulated, and the values? And so at any point in time, any of those things could go awry. So the problem is not always that there is no purpose, or the problem is not always, it could be, the breaking point could be anywhere on those. And the trick is to then go into an organization and help them determine where is it. Sometimes you have a great purpose and you have a great, the team is aligned and even the culture is, it's good, but they're not identifying then what behaviors they should be demonstrating day in and day out to their customer, so that the customer could truly receive the gift that you're trying to provide them.
That's really helpful, actually. If I think about, I know a few other organizations in my network as well, and it's actually the converse can sometimes be a challenge for organizations, which is they may have a very strong financial product or performance, but have a very poor culture. So they might be making money, but the health of the organization is very, very toxic or unhealthy, and there's illness and stress and whatever else. So what we're speaking to with both of those angles is the importance of being intentional around spending time on your people and culture regularly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think as the consumer, customers and consumers are moving on, we are, branding and what's a brand is changing, right? So your frontline employees at the end of the day are your brand, inside and outside of work hours. And that's where maybe you have an organization that is performing well, but how much better could it perform if those things were aligned? And are those consumers at the end of the day getting the ultimate gift that you are there to provide them, or are they getting a watered down version of that gift because your culture is not aligned and healthy?
Well, that's a mic drop moment if I've not ever heard one. We need to have another conversation, Olga. That's wonderful. Right, we're going to need to look to wrap up, because I could be here another 2 hours. So you are awesome. Thank you so much for sparing your time. I'm going to put in a little extra thing here, though, because if anybody that's listening to this that may be in Europe or may be interested to be in Switzerland in a couple of weeks' time, maybe in fact when this goes out, it might even be the week afterwards. Olga's coming to Europe to spend some time at the Ignite conference and also at Hacking HR. It's going to be myself, Olga, Janet Head-Grant, Cornell Thomas, Olga Piehler, Nuria Rojo. There's going to be a lot of very good people in Zurich and St. Gallen across the 22nd to the 24th of October. So if you can be there, come and meet this amazing human, Olga. So how can people find you and reach you between now and then in case they do see you?
Absolutely. Well, I'm in LinkedIn. I'm in Twitter now. I didn't used to be, and now I'm tweeting my heart out. So you can find me at Olga at mywy.io. That's my email. You can find me on LinkedIn as Olga Piehler, Piehler. And again, you can also find me on Twitter. And I do hope you reach out. I honestly, guys, I'm doing that. You can't see us, but I'm doing the I see you sign, because I do hope you guys that reach out. I love meeting new people, and you will make my life better by reaching out. I will be better off if I know you than if I spent my life not knowing that you were there.
And that's a beautiful sentiment. And for anyone that is listening, this is one of the most heartfelt comments from a really genuinely awesome human being. So do reach out, do connect with Olga. And until next time, Olga, thanks for your time.